So, just think about your standard morning routine for a second.
Gotcha.
You know, the alarm rings, you brew a pot of coffee, you lock the front door, and you head off to your job.
Right. Totally mundane stuff.
Yeah, exactly. You pay your taxes on time, you adhere to the laws of your city, you maintain, like, the traditional values you were raised with, and your primary goal is really just to provide for your family.
Just being a regular person, basically.
Exactly. By almost any historical metric, you are the definition of a standard functioning member of civilization. But what if the surrounding culture has shifted so dramatically that simply executing that routine, just being an ordinary rule abiding person, is now viewed as this controversial, deeply subversive, and even dangerous act?
Wow. I mean, that completely redefines the concept of a counterculture.
Right.
Because we usually associate revolution with, tearing down systems, not quietly maintaining them. When adherence to the baseline becomes an act of rebellion, it really signals that the foundational architecture of the society itself has been heavily altered.
And that structural alteration is, well, it's the exact engine driving the material we're looking at today in this deep dive.
Yeah, it's a fascinating premise.
We are untacking a highly polarized, really culturally charged essay. It was originally written in Portuguese, and it's titled The Labyrinth of Value Inversion.
That's quite a title.
It really is. And the core thesis is that modern society has morphed into this sprawling, surrealist landscape where the fundamental definitions of right, wrong, truth, and fiction have been just entirely flipped upside down.
But before we step into the specifics of that labyrinth, we really need to set a clear ground rule for you, the listener, regarding our approach today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is crucial.
Because this essay contains intense, highly polarized social and political commentary. So our role today is strictly that of, like, cartographers.
We're just making the map.
Exactly. We're here to map out the architecture of this specific worldview. We are not taking sides, nor are we endorsing the author's political conclusions or grievances.
Right.
Our goal is just to impartially dismantle the mechanics of the arguments presented so you can understand the underlying logic and see exactly how this perspective is constructed.
We're basically just holding up a mirror to the text, highlighting the contours of the author's frustration. And that frustration really begins with what they see as an assault on reality itself.
Yeah, the policing of reality.
Right. The essay opens by arguing that we are living in an era where, and this is a direct translation, the obvious needs permission to be said.
The obvious needs permission to be said. That's a strong phrase.
It is. The author claims that stating baseline biological realities or just observable everyday facts is now treated by society as a literal offense.
Like it's actively harmful.
Yes. That freedom of expression has allegedly been curtailed and transformed into a crime of opinion.
The author they're highly focused on the policing of the mundane here. I mean, this isn't a critique of government censorship regarding state secrets or, complex geopolitical strategy.
No.
The argument is that the most foundational, observable facts of human biology and daily life are now these heavily guarded, culturally restricted territories.
Yeah, you have to tiptoe around them.
Exactly. The author feels that stating a simple biological fact requires navigating this highly sensitive minefield of potential outrage, where the vocabulary itself is tightly controlled by new cultural arbiters.
Reading that section, honestly, it feels like wandering through a Salvador Dali painting.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Like you are standing there looking at a landscape of melting clocks draped over tree branches, and someone next to you insists it is a perfectly normal, rigid clock.
Right, they're demanding you agree with the illusion.
Yes. And if you point at the puddle of melting metal and say, actually, it's liquid, you're the one who is penalized for breaking the illusion.
Because you stated the obvious.
Right. But if we look critically at the author's premise for a second, pushing back a bit historically, biological logic and quote-unquote the obvious have frequently been weaponized to justify terrible things.
Oh, sure. Exclusionary laws, forced social hierarchies.
Exactly. The denial of rights to minority groups. So, does the essay address the historical danger of using a rigid definition of the obvious as a cultural weapon?
Well, the essay actually rejects that premise entirely.
Oh, really? How so?
By treating biological logic not as a cultural construct that can be weaponized, but as an immutable objective bedrock.
I see.
Yeah, the author does not view these biological facts as historical tools of oppression. They view them as the only reliable tether to reality.
So it's not a debate about progress for them.
No, from this perspective, the friction we see in society isn't a debate between outdated norms and progressive evolution. It's a fundamental epistemological crisis.
A crisis of how we even know what is true.
Precisely. The author sets up a strict dichotomy. On one side, you have objective biological truth. On the other side, you have new artificial ideologies that demand everyone participate in a shared illusion.
Like the Dali painting.
Right. When the system demands you pretend the melting clock is solid, your refusal to do so isn't just rude, it threatens the entire ideological framework.
And, if reality itself is being regulated through these new linguistic and ideological rules, there has to be a massive structural cost to enforce that, right?
Well, absolutely. The illusion doesn't maintain itself.
Right. So who is economically subsidizing this new reality?
That question leads directly into the author's profound critique of the modern social contract.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Well, if we look back at philosophers like John Locke or Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the traditional social contract operates on a basic trade. The individual surrenders certain absolute freedoms and contributes their labor to the state.
And in return, the state provides protection.
Exactly. Physical protection, stability, the preservation of property. But the author is arguing that this contract has been entirely shredded by the state, while the everyday citizen is still being forced to pay the premium.
Yeah, the essay specifically contrasts the ideological activists with the ordinary citizen.
The one waking up early.
Right. The person who wakes up early, follows the laws, and literally sustains the nation's infrastructure with their physical labor. But instead of reaping the benefits of that stability, they're just loaded with an ever-increasing burden of duties and rules.
Well, the rules keep changing.
Yeah. And the author points out that the concept of rights, which should be this universal shield, has been distorted into a tool of privilege for specific ideological agendas.
The distortion of rights is a really key mechanism in the author's argument here. Originally, a right was a negative liberty. The right not to be silenced, the right not to be unlawfully imprisoned.
Just leave me alone, basically.
Right. But the author argues these have been transformed into positive entitlements for specific favored groups. So the everyday worker is holding up their end of the bargain, providing the economic foundation, but the society is actively changing the definition of what their labor is funding.
And the essay uses a very specific economic framing here. It talks about how the workers' sweat, meaning the physical effort meant to guarantee their future and retirement, is being diluted by what the translation calls assistentialism.
Essentialism.
Yeah. In a standard reading, that might just sound like regular welfare or charity, but what is the deeper linguistic nuance of that specific term in this context? Like, how does it connect to the overarching theme of value inversion?
So assistentialism carries a much heavier, much more cynical connotation than standard charity or a social safety net.
How so?
Well, a safety net is designed to catch someone who falls and help them stand back up.
Right. Temporary help.
Exactly. But existentialism, particularly in Latin American political critiques, implies a system deliberately designed to foster permanent dependency.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's the use of state funds to create a compliant, dependent underclass that basically guarantees political power for the administrators of those funds.
So is this more about control than help?
According to this framing, yes. And the author places this in direct opposition to the worker's sweat, because that sweat represents deferred gratification, discipline, and merit.
I see. So the system expropriates the capital generated by merit to fund a bureaucracy that actively rejects meritocracy.
Seriously.
And the essay highlights that while the public debate is consumed by all these ideological agendas, real, tangible societal problems are completely ignored.
Yeah, the basic stuff.
The author specifically lists hunger, a lack of basic sanitation, and the physical safety of workers as issues that have just been abandoned.
It reveals what the author sees as a grotesque inversion of priorities. I mean, you have a society debating highly abstract academic linguistic concepts, while a significant portion of its working class lacks functional sewage systems.
Which is just wild when you put it like that.
It is. The author is making a direct causal link here. They're saying the state is failing at its foundational duties, like sanitation and physical safety, because its resources and attention have been entirely captured by the enforcement of new ideological privileges.
So, the hardworking citizen is essentially forced to fund the very surrealist painting that disdains their existence.
That's a great way to put it, yes.
But, it is one thing to feel economically exploited or frustrated by taxes.
Sure, everyone complains about taxes.
Right. But the essay takes this concept of value inversion directly into the justice system, where the stakes move from financial to existential.
This is where it gets really intense.
Yeah. The author argues that the legal framework itself has been flipped, prioritizing the defense of those who break the law over the actual victims of crime.
This represents probably the darkest manifestation of the value inversion theory in the essay. The fundamental purpose of a justice system is to protect the innocent and punish the guilty, right?
That's the whole point.
But the author believes this mechanism has been entirely hijacked.
The essay specifically points to the architecture of human rights here. The author notes that these principles were originally drafted in the wake of global atrocities to be a shield for the innocent and for refugees fleeing the horrors of war.
To prevent another Holocaust, essentially.
Exactly. Today, however, the essay claims that concept has been weaponized to actively protect those who cause chaos in society.
It's a heavy accusation.
So how exactly does the author believe this institutional capture took place? I mean, what is the mechanism that turned a shield for the innocent into a shield for the guilty?
The mechanism relies on a shifting definition of vulnerability. And it's driven by what the author calls pressure groups.
Pressure groups, like lobbyists.
Yeah, ideological lobbies. The argument is that they successfully lobbied institutions to redefine harm. They shifted the focus from objective, physical harm to systemic, psychological, and historical harm.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. Once the institutions adopted this new framework, the individual who commits a violent crime is no longer viewed primarily as a perpetrator.
They're a victim.
Exactly. They're recast as a victim of systemic societal failures. Therefore, the human rights apparatus intervenes to protect the violent offender from the quote-unquote oppressive state.
Leaving the actual physical victim of the crime completely sidelined.
Yes. In this view, the lawbreaker enjoys more robust systemic protection than the law-abiding citizen who is harmed.
To understand the sheer disproportion the author is critiquing here, we could look at society like a human body and the justice system as its immune system.
Okay, I'm following.
A healthy immune system identifies real pathogens like violent crime or institutional corruption and attacks them to keep the body functioning.
Right, that's what it's supposed to do.
But what the author is describing is a society suffering from a severe autoimmune disease. The immune system is completely ignoring the deadly bacteria multiplying in the bloodstream. And instead, it has started violently attacking the body's own healthy, productive cells.
That's a perfect analogy for what the essay is claiming.
Because the essay points out that clumsy language errors or the misuse of invented pronouns are punished with the severity of grave crimes, while actual physical violence continues unchecked.
That autoimmune metaphor really isolates the systemic glitch the author is diagnosing. The society is obsessed with microscopic linguistic infractions while remaining completely apathetic to macro offenses.
Why do they think that is?
Well, according to the essay's logic, addressing the macro offenses like violent crime or failing infrastructure would require the system to acknowledge objective reality.
It brings us back to the obvious.
Exactly. It would require admitting that certain behaviors are universally descriptive regardless of systemic narratives.
And because the system has already rejected objective reality in favor of ideological purity, it literally cannot fight the real pathogens.
It blinded itself.
Right. It is infinitely easier for a twisted bureaucracy to police a citizen's vocabulary on social media than it is to actually clean up the streets or fix a crumbling bridge.
Precisely. In a labyrinth of inverted values, words are elevated to the status of physical violence, and actual physical violence is downgraded to something that must be accommodated, contextualized, or understood.
So the immune system exhausts all its energy, attacking the healthy cells for minor deviations, allowing the actual disease to spread unhindered.
That's the core of the frustration.
But if the societal immune system is actively targeting healthy cells, how does the independent, everyday person even survive? I mean, where do they fit into this new hierarchy?
That's the million-dollar question. And the author wrestles deeply with this sense of alienation.
The essay states that defending traditional values, defending the family unit, and standing by biological logic strips a person of their dignity in the eyes of modern culture.
You become the enemy.
Yeah. Instead of being respected as the backbone of a nation, these individuals are labeled, marginalized, and subjected to constant surveillance.
It creates a profound psychological toll. I mean, the author is really articulating the experience of becoming entirely illegible to your own government and culture.
The essay asks a very pointed question here. What is the value of a human being today who does not belong to a pressure group.
It's a chilling thought.
It implies that the only way to have standing in this new society is to join an ideological collective or a specific lobby.
Yep. Group identity over individual merit.
Right. So the ordinary person who just wants to live by the truth, mind their own business, and reap the fruits of their own effort is viewed with intense suspicion.
The society the author describes operates on an economy of tribalism and collective victimhood. Power is distributed through these pressure groups, which act as the enforcers of the new ideological rules.
So independence makes you a target.
Absolutely. If you are an independent, traditional, law-abiding individual relying solely on personal merit and biological logic, you just do not fit into any of the recognized categories of systemic vulnerability or ideological purity.
You are effectively opting out of the shared illusion.
You're refusing to participate.
You are refusing to melt like the clocks in the surrealist painting. And that independence is treated as an active threat to a system built entirely on collective dependencies.
The painter is furious that you are ruining the aesthetic.
Yeah.
Your very existence as an independent, self-sustaining individual exposes the fragility of the ideological framework. Therefore, the independent citizen isn't just ignored, they become a problem to be solved.
A glitch in the matrix.
Right. They are an anomaly that the system feels an urgent need to monitor, re-educate, or penalize.
Which brings us to the ultimate thesis of this entire labyrinth. I mean, we started by looking at a world where stating the obvious is categorized as a crime.
Where biological facts are offensive.
Right. Where the physical sweat of the working class is expropriated to fund ideologies that disdain them. And where the justice system acts as an autoimmune disease, protecting chaos while attacking everyday citizens for pronoun errors.
It's a bleak picture.
It is. In this landscape, being a common, correct person who relies on basic facts and hard work is no longer the foundational baseline of society.
It has been pushed to the absolute extreme margins. It is the outlier.
It is the ultimate rebellion.
Yeah.
The author concludes that in this inverted modern world, simply being an ordinary, correct person has become the most revolutionary and dangerous act of all.
It's wild to think about.
You no longer need to organize a protest or throw a brick through a window to be considered a radical. You simply have to state a biological fact, raise your family, and go to work.
It is a sobering and heavily layered conclusion to a deeply provocative text.
Very much so.
And it leaves us with a vital question to consider, entirely independent of whether you agree or disagree with the author's political grievances.
Something for the listener to mull over.
Exactly. If basic adherence to tradition, biological reality, and everyday law and order is now structurally framed by cultural institutions as a dangerous rebellion, what is the long-term prognosis for social cohesion?
Can a society survive that?
Right. Can a civilization actually survive, let alone thrive, if its fundamental definition of what it means to be ordinary is split so violently in two?
It forces a completely different perspective on the cultural friction we see every day. The next time you witness a public debate over what constitutes an obvious truth, or you see a headline about how the justice system has allocated its protections, you might find yourself looking for the underlying architecture of this labyrinth.
You'll start seeing the melting clocks everywhere.
You really will. Well, thank you for joining us as we mapped out these inverted values today. Keep questioning the structures around you, keep looking for the underlying mechanisms of the arguments you encounter, and we will catch you next time. And remember, just because the surrounding culture demands that you see a melting clock doesn't mean you have to surrender your own eyes.